The silent departure. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council hummed with nervous energy as representatives from over 300 species gathered for an emergency session. The vast circular chamber, with its crystalline dome that displayed the stars beyond, had witnessed countless debates and diplomatic triumphs over its millennia of existence. Today, however, it would witness something unprecedented. High Chancellor Vexnar, a towering Aquelian with shimmering blue scales, raised all four of his arms to silence the murmuring crowd. His voice, amplified by the chamber's perfect acoustics, carried a rare tremor of uncertainty. Esteemed representatives of the Galactic Council, I have called this emergency session to address a situation of utmost gravity. The Chancellor's gill flaps pulsed with tension. As of 600 Standard Galactic Time, the Terran Confederation has formally withdrawn from all diplomatic relations with the Council and its member species. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices, shouts, hisses, electronic buzzing, and telepathic pulses of alarm washing over the assembly. Silence. Vexnar's voice cut through the noise. The message was clear and unambiguous. All human diplomats, merchants, and representatives have been recalled from Council space. All treaties, trade agreements, and military alliances involving humanity have been declared null and void. Terran space is now closed to all non-human vessels, effective immediately. Ambassador Kazan of the Valerian Empire, a species of silicon-based predators known for their strategic acumen, leaned forward at her station. This is obviously a negotiating tactic, Chancellor. The humans are skilled at brinkmanship. They've employed it successfully in disputes with the Dorn Imperium and the Iridian Consortium. I thought the same, Ambassador, Vexnar replied. Until our attempts at communication were met with automated responses, their diplomatic channels have been shut down completely. Their embassy on the Nexus station has been evacuated and sealed. Ambassador Trell of the Draconis Confederacy, his reptilian features hardening into a mask of anger, slammed his clawed fist on the console. This is an outrage. After all we've done to accommodate these upstarts, they'd been in galactic space for barely 3 centuries, and they presume to dictate terms to species that were traveling the stars before their ancestors crawled out of the primordial ooze. Perhaps, began the soft, melodic voice of Ambassador Lyra of the Aetheri, one of the few species that had formed genuine friendships with humanity, we should consider what might have prompted this action. The humans have always been calculated in their diplomacy. They do not act without reason. The debate raged for hours, with factions forming and dissolving as quickly as they arose. The militaristic species called for a show of force, economic powerhouses advocated for trade sanctions, and the more diplomatic races suggested patience and continued attempts at communication. But beneath the surface of these debates lay a growing realization, one that none wanted to acknowledge openly, but all were beginning to understand. The Galactic Council had become dependent on humanity in ways they had never anticipated. In the command center of the TSS Invictus, Admiral Helena Chen watched the encrypted feeds from the Council meeting with cool detachment. Her uniform, adorned only with the simple insignia of the Terran Space Force, belied her importance in humanity's carefully orchestrated withdrawal. "They're reacting exactly as predicted," noted Commander Jackson, her executive officer. "The militarists want to flex their muscles, the merchants are panicking about trade disruptions, and the diplomats are wringing their hands. And none of them are asking the right questions," Chen replied, her eyes never leaving the holographic displays. "They're so focused on why we left that they're not considering what we've been doing for the past 70 years. Jackson nodded grimly. "Phase 1 is complete, Admiral. All human personnel have been extracted from Council space. Our border fortifications are at full readiness, and the deep space monitoring arrays are operational. All communication relays have been reconfigured to the encrypted protocols." "And the embedded systems?" Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. "All dormant, awaiting activation codes." Jackson's voice lowered slightly. "Admiral, do you think they'll actually attempt military action?" Chen's expression remained impassive. Some will. The Draconis and the Valerians won't be able to help themselves. They've never understood humanity's approach to conflict. They still think in terms of fleet engagements and planetary bombardment. While we've been playing a different game entirely, Jackson finished the thought. Precisely, Chen replied. Inform the deployment teams. I want our defensive grids at maximum readiness within 12 hours. The Council will be making its first move soon, and we need to ensure their lesson is educational. Back in the Council chambers, the initial shock had given way to strategic planning. The economic impact of humanity's withdrawal was already being felt. Human-operated shipping companies handled nearly 30% of all interstellar trade. Human-designed AI systems managed traffic control for dozens of major space lanes, and human diplomatic corps had mediated countless disputes between rival species. The Orion Trade Corridor has already reported a 40% decrease in traffic, reported the mercantile minister, a diminutive Quillian whose spines quivered with distress. 3 major hubs are experiencing critical supply shortages. The automated systems that regulated flow through the corridor were human-designed and have been shut down remotely. Chancellor Vexenar's complexion had darkened to a deep indigo, a sign of extreme stress in his species. What of our military readiness? If the humans have truly isolated themselves, we must ensure they don't take more aggressive action. Fleet Commander Xerix, a cybernetically enhanced Vex whose metallic exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber lights, stepped forward. We've detected massive movement within Terran space. Their defense platforms around key systems have been activated, and their fleet formations suggest a defensive posture. They're preparing for something, Chancellor, but they aren't mobilizing for an offensive. Ambassador Trell's patience had worn thin. Enough of this caution. The humans have insulted the Council's authority. They must be reminded of their place in the galactic order. I propose a military demonstration, a show of force at their borders. Nothing provocative, merely a reminder that they are one species among many. The motion gained surprising support, even from species that typically favored diplomacy. Fear was driving the Council toward rash action. Only Ambassador Lyra of the Aethery voiced strong opposition. The humans do not respond well to threats, veiled or otherwise. If we send warships to their borders, they will interpret it as an act of aggression. I urge restraint. But her voice was drowned out in the clamor for action. The motion passed with a majority vote, a rare occurrence in the typically deadlocked Council. A diplomatic fleet would be dispatched to the edge of Terran space, consisting of vessels from 12 different species, led by the Draconis Confederacy. 3 days later, the fleet arrived at the designated coordinates, just outside the newly established Terran border markers. Composed of 24 warships, small enough to claim diplomatic intentions, but large enough to serve as a show of force. The fleet took up position and broadcast the Council's formal request for renewed dialogue. The response was silence. No communication, no acknowledgement, nothing. For 18 tense hours, the fleet maintained position, continuing to broadcast on all frequencies. Sensors detected massive energy signatures from within Terran space, defense platforms, orbital installations, and patrol vessels, but no direct response came. Commander Krax of the Draconis flagship grew increasingly agitated. This silence is deliberate disrespect, he snarled to his bridge crew. They mean to humiliate us with their indifference. In a decision that would later be described as catastrophically ill-advised, Commander Krax ordered his vessel to advance 1 light minute past the Terran border marker, still technically in neutral space by galactic law, but close enough to provoke a response. The response came with terrifying swiftness. Without warning or communication, 3 previously undetected Terran vessels decloaked within firing range of the Draconis flagship. These weren't the bulky, recognizable warships of the Terran main fleet. They were sleek, angular vessels of a design never before witnessed in galactic space, black as the void, with only faint blue energy lines tracing their hulls. Before Commander Krax could order evasive maneuvers, Precision energy beams lanced out from the Terran vessels, striking the Draconis flagship with surgical accuracy. There was no explosion, no dramatic destruction. Instead, the flagship simply went dark, all systems simultaneously disabled. As the rest of the diplomatic fleet reacted in panic, the Terran vessels transmitted a single message on all frequencies, in clear, unencrypted standard galactic code. This is your only warning. The next vessel to cross our border will be destroyed. Humanity has withdrawn from the Galactic Council. This decision is non-negotiable. Return to your territories and do not approach Terran space again. The message was followed by technical specifications, detailed scans of every vessel in the Council fleet, complete with schematics showing exactly where the Terran weapons had targeted the Draconis flagship. It was a demonstration of not just military superiority, but of intelligence-gathering capabilities far beyond what the Council had believed humans possessed. As the crippled Draconis vessel was towed back by its escort ships, and the diplomatic fleet retreated in disarray, the true nature of humanity's withdrawal began to dawn on the Galactic Council. This wasn't a negotiating tactic or a temporary political maneuver. This was the beginning of something new and terrifying. The true strategy. The Council chambers had never seemed so chaotic. What had once been a model of interstellar cooperation had devolved into factional squabbling, accusations, and barely concealed panic. The diplomatic fleet's disastrous encounter with the Terran Defense Forces had shattered any illusion of Council unity. Your recklessness has brought us to the brink of war. Ambassador Kizan of the Valerians hissed at the Draconis delegation. A show of force. You couldn't even keep your vessel functional. Ambassador Trell's scales flushed with rage. Our ship was attacked without provocation. We were still in neutral space by all established conventions. Enough. Chancellor Vexnar's voice boomed through the chamber. This bickering solves nothing. We must understand what we're facing and respond with unity. The chamber quieted, but the tension remained palpable. A holographic projection appeared in the center of the room. Detailed analysis of the Terran vessels that had disabled the Draconis flagship. Fleet Commander Zarek stepped forward, his cybernetic eyes whirring as they focused on the projection. These vessels employ technology we've never observed in Terran ships before. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases, and their stealth capabilities exceeded our most advanced detection systems. Are you suggesting, began Ambassador Lyra carefully, that humanity has been concealing their true technological capabilities from the Council? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. For centuries, member species had been required to disclose major technological advancements, particularly in military applications, to the Council's Science Directorate. The sharing of technology had been one of the founding principles of galactic cooperation. It appears, Xerix continued grimly, that this is merely the beginning of what the humans have concealed. New projections appeared. Data streams showing cascading failures across multiple sectors of Council space. Trade networks, communication relays, navigational beacons, automated defense systems, all experiencing unexplained malfunctions or shutdowns. We've discovered, Xerix explained, his mechanical voice tinged with what almost sounded like respect, that human-designed systems throughout Council space contained dormant subroutines, code that remained inactive until receiving specific triggers. These systems are now activating, one by one, creating strategic disruptions across our infrastructure. Sabotage, breathed Ambassador Kizan. They've been planning this for decades. Not sabotage, corrected Xerix. None of these systems are suffering permanent damage. They're simply pausing. It's a demonstration, not destruction. Chancellor Vexnar's gill flaps fluttered in agitation. A demonstration of what, exactly? Dependency, Ambassador Lyra answered softly. They're showing us how much we've come to rely on them without even realizing it. On Earth, in the Terran Strategic Command Headquarters beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Elisa Rice stood before the Global Assembly. 50 representatives of humanity's unified government, watching as real-time data from across the galaxy flowed across massive displays. Phase 2 has proceeded with 94% effectiveness, she reported. The embedded systems have activated according to schedule, and the resulting disruptions are forcing the Council to recognize their technological dependencies. Our border defense platforms successfully repelled the probing fleet with minimal force, as instructed. President Ayanna Chen nodded slowly. And the collateral impact on civilian populations? Minimal, Madam President, General Reyes replied. As designed, the disruptions affect administrative and military systems primarily. Medical, life support, and essential civilian infrastructure remain functional. We are not waging war on innocent populations. Not yet, came a voice from the Assembly. Representative Keller, a longtime hawk in matters of galactic policy. But let's not delude ourselves. This could escalate to open conflict if the Council decides to respond with military force. President Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. The Council lacks the unity to mount an effective military response. Representative, that is precisely why this strategy was adopted. For too long, humanity has served as the technological backbone and diplomatic mediator for species that have repeatedly demonstrated their willingness to exploit us while simultaneously dismissing our concerns. She turned to address the entire Assembly. 3 times, we brought evidence of the Draconis biological weapons program to the Council. 3 times, our evidence was dismissed. Twice, we petitioned for intervention in the systematic enslavement of sentient species in the Orion Rim. Twice, we were voted down by species with economic interests in the region. Her voice hardened. The Galactic Council has become a tool for maintaining an unjust status quo, not an instrument of progress and cooperation as it was intended. Humanity will no longer prop up a system that refuses to reform. Back in Council space, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Without human mediators, old conflicts between species were reigniting. The Valerians and the Iridians, whose territorial disputes have been held in check by human-brokered treaties, were already reporting border skirmishes. The resource-rich Tannhauser Nebula, jointly managed under a complex agreement designed by human diplomats, was now contested by 3 different species, each claiming exclusive rights. The economic impact was even more severe. The Galactic Credit System, which utilized security protocols designed by human cryptographers, was experiencing unprecedented volatility. Supply chains that had relied on human logistics were failing, leading to shortages on dozens of worlds. In a private meeting room adjacent to the main council chamber, Ambassador Lyra of the Aetheri met with a small group of representatives from species that had maintained closer ties with humanity. "We need to understand their true intentions," said Morote of the Klaxi, his insectoid features impossible to read. "This cannot simply be about withdrawal. The humans are too strategic for such a limited goal." "I agree," Lyra nodded. "They are demonstrating their importance to galactic stability. But to what end? They must want something." "Perhaps," offered Saren of the Nomadi, her holographic form flickering slightly. "What they want is for us to ask that question directly, without assumptions, without threats." The group exchanged glances, then reached a consensus. Using channels outside the Council's official communication networks, they transmitted a simple message to Terran Command. "We seek to understand. Not to demand, not to threaten. To understand." The response came 12 hours later, not as a message, but as an invitation. Coordinates for a meeting in neutral space, with a request that representatives come unarmed and without military escort. After brief deliberation, Lyra, Morotai, and Saren were selected to attend. They arrived at the designated location to find a single Terran vessel waiting, smaller than a warship, with clean lines and minimal weaponry visible. They were welcomed aboard with unexpected warmth by Captain James Rivera, who led them to a conference room where a singular figure awaited. Admiral Helena Chen, the architect of humanity's withdrawal strategy, rose to greet them. Her expression was neither hostile nor particularly friendly, simply focused. "Thank you for coming," she began without preamble. "You are here because your species have demonstrated a genuine commitment to the principles the Council claims to uphold, but so often ignores in practice." "Admiral," Lyra replied carefully, "the Council is in disarray. Conflicts are erupting across multiple sectors. Economic systems are failing. If this continues, billions of lives could be affected." "We are aware," Chen nodded, "and we regret the necessity of these disruptions. But they are temporary, demonstrations rather than permanent measures." "Demonstrations of what?" asked Morote directly. "Of the true balance of power," Chen answered. "For too long, humanity has been viewed as just another member species of the Council, valuable for our innovation perhaps, but ultimately one voice among many. That perception needed correction." She activated a holographic display showing the galaxy, with human influence highlighted in blue: shipping lanes, communication networks, defense systems, diplomatic missions. The blue tendrils reached into every sector, every major world, forming a vast web that underpinned the entire galactic civilization. "Humanity doesn't wish to rule," Chen continued. "We have no territorial ambitions beyond our existing systems, but we will no longer be ignored when we raise concerns about injustice, exploitation, or threats to galactic stability." "You want a seat at the head of the table," Saren observed. "We want a new table entirely," Chen corrected. "The current Council structure is dysfunctional, designed to maintain power balances that were established millennia before humanity even achieved spaceflight. It needs reform, not adjustment." "And if the Council refuses?" Lyra asked, though she already suspected the answer. Chen's expression remained impassive. "Then humanity will remain withdrawn, and the systems we've built and maintained will remain dormant. The galaxy will adapt, eventually, but the transition will be difficult." The proposal Chen presented was breathtaking in its scope, not just a reformation of the Council, but a complete restructuring of galactic governance. A new system based on principles of actual cooperation rather than power balances, with built-in protections for developing species and mechanisms to prevent the exploitation that had become commonplace under the current regime. When the three representatives returned to Council space with humanity's terms, the reaction was predictably mixed. The established powers rejected them outright, seeing the proposal as an ultimatum rather than a genuine offer of reform. Newer Council members, smaller powers, and those who had suffered under the old system were more receptive. The Council fractured into two camps: those who sought accommodation with humanity, and those who refused to yield to what they saw as extortion. As the economic and social disruptions worsened, the balance gradually shifted toward accommodation. The final push came from an unexpected quarter. The Draconis Confederacy, still smarting from the humiliation of their flagship's disabling, launched a surprise attack on 3 human border outposts, determined to prove that humanity could be forced back to the table on the Council's terms. What they encountered was not just military defeat, but comprehensive defensive systems that rendered their attack completely ineffective. Their weapons were remotely disabled, navigation systems corrupted, and communication arrays shut down, all without a single human vessel firing a shot. When recordings of the failed attack spread throughout Council space, the last resistance to humanity's proposal collapsed. The old order had been demonstrated not just as unjust, but as fundamentally outmatched. 6 months later, Admiral Helena Chen stood in the newly constructed Chamber of Concord on the neutral world of Harmony. The chamber, with its revolutionary design allowing all representatives truly equal status, was filled with delegates from across the galaxy, old Council members and newly recognized species alike. "The transition has not been without pain," she acknowledged in her address. "But we stand now at the beginning of a new era in galactic cooperation. Not one dominated by humanity, as some feared, but one in which all voices can be heard, and no injustice can be hidden behind procedural maneuvers or power politics." She gazed around the chamber, meeting the eyes, or sensory organs, of each delegation in turn. Humanity withdrew from diplomacy not to abandon it, but to transform it. We demonstrated our importance not out of pride, but necessity. The galaxy needed to understand that true cooperation cannot exist alongside exploitation and willful blindness to suffering. As the new Galactic Concord held its inaugural session, messages flowed once again through the human design networks that spanned the stars. Trade resumed, conflicts cooled, and a tentative optimism spread across countless worlds. Humanity had withdrawn from diplomacy only to reinvent it entirely, proving that sometimes the most powerful negotiating position is walking away from the table until a better one can be built.